Presentation by the partner Roland Berger, Defense Electronics and System Design Report, Policy Recommendations by Rahul Gangal.
Okay, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing us to present this today. It's a great honor and an opportunity for us to showcase the work that we've presented to the government and which was referred to. At the outset, I think we need to thank a certain set of people because whilst this appears like an output, it is really an action that has taken place over the last 15 months or so, both of which would not be possible without the two associations, NASSCOM and IESA, under the able leadership of Mr. Krishnamurthy and Mr. Chandrasekhar, to have come through. Their teams, whether it was NASSCOM, which was supported by KSV, Bishakha and Niranjan, or whether it was IESA, which was Mr. Vidyashankar, Venki and Rajiv Jain. The teams from industry, which I think worked very hard to challenge each and every recommendation which was made, whether it was a team from TCS, HCL, Wipro, Mahindra Satyam, L&T IES, Cyient, Infosys, Quest, Rambus, Tata Advanced Systems, Tata Power, Larsen and Toubro, or from the government, whether it was HAL or Bharat Electronics, the Electronics Ministry, DITI, and the role that they played in delivering this, and last of all, Ministry of Defense and the kind of leadership they showed through both the additional secretaries, Mr. Rao, Mrs. Rajan, and of course the secretary, Mr. Mohan Kumar. So without much further ado, we'll quickly go through what was presented. The approach that we took was as follows. We did a ground up and a top down study of the Indian electronics and defense ecosystem. We basically analyzed most firms that were operating, identified almost 100 product categories, defined the depth to which there was capability in India, so a supplier roadmap. We also then determined a product by product breakdown of how much electronics demand is actually being generated and what can be fulfilled in India. And then we said, what are the institutional gaps, and let's try to work on addressing them. What came about was that in the next 12, 13 years, you will have almost 72 odd billion euros of USD of spend happening in India on defense electronics. Of this, roughly 52 odd billion would be on platform driven electronics. Another large portion, or the residual portion, would be on electronics for system of system programs like Project TCS, like Project BMS, etc., communication networks. And roughly this is how the split emerged for what was the platform spread and what was the spread from programs. And this is relatively detailed out. What you're seeing eventually concluded into almost 1,000 pages of work which was presented to the government. What were the policy inputs that came through? And I'm really happy to find some of them echoed in the messages which Dr. Saraswat gave and Dr. Chandrasekhar gave. Let's take you through them. One, what was the objective? Of course, the objective is to build a robust industry which is comparable globally in terms of size, resilience, can derive enough jobs, and can be the primary base from which India can source internally. It can also be a launch pad to build an export-oriented business, as Arun was mentioning in the previous talk. Really 6 large segments of inputs came through. They were on visibility of technology, structural issues, DPSUs and outsourcing, because we still continue to be driven substantially by what defense PSUs drive in India, program award issues, policy related issues, and industry related issues. We'll go through them. Some of them can have ramifications in multiple areas, but we'll touch upon them as we move forward. The first is visibility. And I think this is one aspect which we need clarity on. And Dr. Saraswat, you were absolutely right, sir, when you said that the industry technology life cycle today is 6-7 years. We're running on procurement programs that are 12-13 years. By the time a procurement is over, 3 times the technology has changed. Are you giving enough visibility to Indian industry in the short to medium term for them to plan their business? And so the recommendation was, whilst you do give visibility of 2-year programs and 20-year long-term visibility, maybe there is a need to give intermediate visibility of 5 to 7 years, both in terms of technologies and products. And this we felt is extremely implementable because the MOD has a 5-year plan. It can be shared privately through associations. It can be done through an MOD-driven presentation. But once that is given, private industry then has a way to define whether they want to make business cases on categories or not. Right now, they are making it on a 20-year technology projection, which is not workable, sir. And the same is the issue with technology roadmap. I think we talk broadly of technologies, but granularity is missing. So, for example, we talk of night vision, but are we talking of thermal? Are we talking of EO? If we are talking of EO, in what spectrum are we talking? So that private industry can go out and get that kind of competence from the rest of the world. Of course, like any industry, we can't aim to start with full products. We'll have to start with sustainment, with upgrades, with MRO. Maybe that's a way forward for us, even on platforms. We also felt that there is a big gap in writing the right specifications when it comes to electronics. And hence there is a need for public-private partnership to come together, wherein you could use some of the competence that is sitting in the private sector to help the government draft QRs much better. And both NASSCOM and IESA have committed that they would be able to extend support in creating this organization, even if it's partly under the government, partly under associations. Defense electronics as a product is also not very well defined in terms of manufacturing codes. So there is a need to extend those codes and have more manufacturing visibility on what is to be produced. Like you said, sir, this is a key recommendation that we have. I think this industry will not go anywhere until commons infrastructure is created, which is testing, certification, documentation. These type of infrastructure cannot be expected to be created by private industry on an individual basis. Hence, there is a need for the government to work with industrial clusters, industrial parks, to finance creation of clusters of common infrastructure around which electronics design manufacturing industry will automatically grow. But I think when we start by first creating industry and then creating the commons infrastructure, it does not work. I think we'll have to reverse the cycle and first create the commons infrastructure around which the industry will automatically populate. And thank you so much for echoing this point in your dialogue as well. Financing is a big issue. And financing is in two ways. We have how is the government guaranteeing that it is supporting industry on development of financing if the technology is accepted by the user. So we're saying if it is accepted by the user, then there has to be a mechanism in which some element of the cost of development gets shared. We're not saying that if it is not accepted or if we're doing our own R&D, but if it is accepted by the user, if it is accepted into a program, then there has to be a mechanism to share some costs. The TDF, the Technology Developmental Fund, is extremely limited. It gives very small outlays. Electronics industry is also not an industry that works on a micro scale. It requires a certain scale. Somehow when we give our incentives, we have always incentivized companies to either remain small or fragmented by giving multipliers for remaining small or sizes, etc. But there is a need to increase the outlay that you are allowing industry so that not only is it a play for micro and small, but also medium-sized electronics industry where real capability may reside today in India. ESDM linkage is critical, but how will it be operationalized in terms of preferential market access is critical. We expect the government to introduce it to much more and many more sectors so that this becomes a driving force going forward. One more factor that is important is when you value electronics, you value Indian value add. Now, if we are importing everything, our value add is traditionally not too much. Can we look at a model in which you start looking at Indian electronics? If it is design controlled, held in India, to be valued on the full value of the product rather than just the value add. And hence it will become more lucrative for global companies, and there could be many more examples like T connectivity to follow, which will establish product lines in India. IDDM was talked about, EPCR has been talked about. ESOs, somehow when we look at large system of system projects like tactical communication, battlefield management systems, we tend to be oriented towards them being manufacturing driven. But in a large part of our industry, engineering services has design competence. And it's not, manufacturing competence is actually a subset of engineering design competence. So can the procurement procedure be such that as long as engineering services companies can demonstrate enough capability to lead these projects, they are also allowed to lead these projects? And it is not said that, because you're an engineering services company, you may be having the right size, you may be having the right people, and you may be having the right talent, and you may have done this for globally for anywhere else, but because you're not manufacturing, you will not be leading this project. And I think that parity needs to be brought in to say, as long as they are capable companies, if they can stitch together a solution, we should be open to that. Talent pipeline is a key issue, and I think that's the biggest derailer that we are facing. We will need approximately 2 million engineers with relatively deep understanding of defense electronics in the next 12 years. At the current output, we will produce around 72,000 engineers, which means we'll not even be at 3.5% of the output that is desired. And hence there needs to be massive scaling up of the talent pipeline per se. And this cannot be done only by the government sector. This cannot be done only by the private sector. I think both of them will have to find ways to deliver that individually and also in collaboration with each other. Electronics industry globally for aerospace defense comes up around parks. So it does not come up as a singular unit somewhere in the world. It comes up as clusters. Are we promoting enough clusters? And yes, so that the point that you talked about as the first cluster in Telangana is a start. But I think we need many more such clusters to come up, because unless it's a cluster approach, no single company will own the entire set of competencies for any product. And hence, we will always remain at a modular competence level rather than graduating to a product competence level. Of course, MSMEs need to be supported, and we also need to find ways so that singular companies, whether they are in private sector or in public sector, do not hog up a large part of the product value within themselves and are able to democratize a part of the value chain to the larger industry. Commercially off the shelf, military off the shelf competencies need to be leveraged. At times, Indian industry has tried to create everything on its own. In a global environment where technology life cycles are 6 years, 7 years, where product volumes are not very high, this may not be a sustainable model going forward. There is a need to leverage what is commercially off the shelf available and ruggedize it or convert it into a military product for your own need. You may need to run an algorithm, which is a secrecy algorithm, to ensure your system is protected. But generating everything ab initio may not be the way forward. Of course, outsourcing, and this is a consistent demand that always comes through. Private sector needs to be supported with a more aggressive sharing of work from PSUs and ordnance factories. Of course, it is not to say that this has to be done at the cost of the quality of the work output from private sector. This needs to be done if private sector can demonstrate competence. These were some of the broad recommendations that were presented. We are very happy to report that all of them were accepted. And we're now looking forward to supporting the government and the associations under the leadership of the Honorable Minister on implementing these in a reasonably aggressive time frame. Thank you so much, everybody. We're really proud and privileged to be here. Thank you so much.